Hello students, welcome back to another session of The Analyst, where we will be discussing the most important news and events from today's The Indian Express and The Hindu. This will be 16th of July 2023 and we will be providing you insights that are tailored specifically for UPSC aspirants and also for all the curious minds out there. Now, let us begin with the table of contents of the things that we are going to discuss today. The very first article is with reference to our Prime Minister's 2-day state visit to the United Arab Emirates and the various outcomes of that visit. The second article is with respect to the recent issues and controversies that are being seen in the Forest Conservation Bill 2023. The third article is against about the frequency, about the increasing frequency of heat waves in European continent, which is a very important instance of extreme weather event. The third article is important from prelims specific information, where we'll be discussing about the government efforts under AMRUT cities. This is a particular scheme which is trying to rejuvenate our modern urban areas. Finally, we'll be wrapping up the discussion with the various applications of CRISPR technology. Before that, we'll be also discussing some basics about CRISPR. So, starting with the very first article, where our Indian Prime Minister concluded his recent international visits to two nations. First was to France and second to United Arab Emirates or UAE. Now, this 2-day visit to the UAE was very prominent for India because these two nations, India and UAE, go back far away from present times to historic relations between these two nations, where we have seen mutual amount of partnerships, cooperation in economic spheres, and a heavy dose of friendly relations between the two countries, because these countries are bound by people-to-people connections, specifically through our 3 million strong Indian community who are living there. So these two countries are very important when it comes to UPSC examination. So let us go through the various dimensions of this discussion. Now, if we look at the foundations of India and UAE relations, they go back to around 300 before Common Era, right, or 300 BCE, where these countries used to engage in various economic activities through trade. Then we had a common thread of colonial history between our history, where the British imperial power was dominating our areas. Then in 1972, when the UAE gained its independence, India set up its first embassy in the UAE. Progressing onto the 1990s, during India's liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms, the country UAE became very important because UAE supplied us with crucial energy requirements, specifically crude oil. So our reforms during the 1990s can be kind of attributed to UAE due to their immense efforts toward us. And also, we also play a very important role in the development of their own country. In 2017, a very prominent event took place where their crown prince visited India at our Republic Day parade, where the very initial stages of a comprehensive economic partnership agreement was agreed upon, and thereon the negotiation were started. In 2022, it culminated in the CEPA, which came into effect, which was a major historic achievement for these two nations because they focused on deepening their economic collaboration. So they focused on geoeconomics for the intricate linkage of economic sectors between these two nations. Here, the duty-free access of various goods and services which were notified under the CEPA were signed. And as of now, as of July 2023, we have seen a drastic increase of 20% trade between these two nations. And right now, from our latest visit, we also have some important highlights. The two leaders of the two nations, they agreed that we should be targeting for around $100 billion trade between UAE and India. And in that spirit, India through our Reserve Bank of India and the Central Bank of UAE signed through Memorandum of Understandings. Here, the first MOU was to promote the use of local currencies. Now, this is a very interesting trend that most of the developing countries are adopting. First, it was in the case of India, seen during the Russia and India bilateral trade. Now, India also diversified this relationship with Myanmar in Tunisia, and right now we are also seeing this in the case of UAE, where Indian trade and the UAE trade with India will also be settled in local currency using INR or Indian rupee and UAE dirham. This is very prominent because right now the world is seeing a very prominent threat of de-dollarization, where most of the countries are trying to break away from the hegemony of the US dollar. This will come with many benefits, particularly to stabilize the trade between the two nations and also stabilize the domestic economy at large, because we will be relying our trust on a single currency, that is dollar. The next will be with regard to the linking of the Indian UPI or United Payments Interface with UAE's instant payment platform, which is the same like UPI that is existing in the UAE. So we can do what? A better access to cross-border transactions, a better way of tracking the various transactions and also preventing some issues like terrorism, finance, money laundering activities. So we can try to even streamline remittances, which are very important source of income for India, because most of the people, Indian people, are living there, which contributes to around 30% of UAE's population. So it is a huge number. Next, India has also signed an MOU with the Education Ministry and Education and Knowledge Department of Abu Dhabi for setting up IIT Delhi's first international campus abroad. This will be at Abu Dhabi itself, and this is not the first time any single IIT is setting up its campus abroad. You know, within this month only, we have seen another news of IIT Madras also setting up at Tanzania's Zanzibar. Along with this, the two countries' climate cooperation also gained significance because the two leaders declared that at the COP28 or the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework for Climate Change or UNFCCC, which will be held at Dubai by the end of the year, they focused on bringing or converging the global south climate's interests into the bigger picture. The two countries focused on mobilizing the $100 billion finance towards climate change that the developed country had once promised. So they will be raking up this issue at the COP28, and they will be committing towards this respect. Then the global stocktake of collective action, which is right now going on, they will also have to emphasize on this particular aspect of accurately calculating how much the climate finance efforts will be actually requiring. Finally, UAE is also promised or pledged to increase in investment across the energy spectrum in India, where India's Strategic Petroleum Reserve Program, which is, you can tell, a kind of a emergency reserve of petroleum for India, which is located along the eastern coasts, specifically in states of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. So UAE is also focused to invest in this area, apart from the energy spectrum such as crude oil and also the non-renewable sectors. Now, areas of mutual cooperations are very interesting between these two nations. The first is the cultural context, because this is the first because the people-to-people contact is the most prominent between the India and the UAE. Around 3.5 million Indians reside in the UAE, which is around 30% of their own population. So it is very significant. They share a high amount of culinary, cultural, artistic similarities between these two nations. The economic cooperation is very important for India, where India is right now at a stage where it is formulating various free trade agreements from the perspective of first gaining market access to various nations, and second tapping into the global value chains across the world, such as tapping into the global value chains of smartphone manufacturing, semiconductors, solar panels. Now, India is also trying to diversify, and specifically UAE comes at a very pivotal space because it is located in the West Asian region, where it is also located strategically between the West and the South Asia. So, India will be trying to diversify its trades. And also UAE will be also looking to tap into the Indian markets. So we have a huge amount of FDIs which are coming in form of investment into India. Around $12 billion investment of FDI flew into India from UAE. And this makes the UAE the 9th largest FDI partner of India at large. The energy and space sector is also exciting within the two nations because the hydrocarbon or the crude oil, I can say very simply, it is being supplied by UAE in huge numbers, and it is the 4th largest supplier of India. Then in UAE's Vision 2021, which is a document by the UAE, it has emphasized that right now the Gulf or the Middle East or UAE specifically, they are now transitioning from crude oil to the renewable sectors like solar energy, like wind energy. Now they will be trying to diversify their own supply chains. So in this vision document, UAE has highlighted India as one of their strategic partners in their vision to transition towards the future of green energy and clean energies. The Naif 1 is a nano satellite which was actually launched by our own ISRO. So this also strategizes the space cooperation between these two nations. When I come to the India's West Asian policy, UAE becomes very important because it is a member of I2U2, where I2U2 is consisting of India, Israel, UAE and the US, United States. I2U2 is often also known as the Western Quad. We know about the Quad, right? It is in the Pacific Ocean, and I2U2, we can tell it is the Western Quad, or it is a land quad also, because it is a kind of a US alliance for diversifying its partners, and the presence of Israel also gains prominence because right now Israel, US, they are trying to diversify and make its dominance within the Asian continent, and US has tapped into Israel's interest at large, where we have also now the rest of the three countries, India, UAE and Israel within this particular camp. And it is in India's interest also because India can also become present in that particular area. The Strait of Hormuz sees huge amount of traffic with respect to energy trade between various nations. There is Iran, there is Saudi Arabia, there is Kuwait, Oman, Qatar. So all these nations are located there who are huge suppliers of crude oil around the world. And India-UAE partnerships are also trying to secure this particular region for our own energy security needs. The Gulf Cooperation Council is a particular arena where UAE is not much happy with. So it is also trying to link with India in that particular respect. And also the Organization for Islamic Cooperation is an area where India is not a very prominent part, and UAE is actually acting as a voice for India in that particular organization. Coming to the defense and security measures, we can see that we have trilateral air exercise on humanitarian and disaster religions approaches between the two nations. So they will be collaborating for various approaches related to humanitarian efforts. Exercise Varuna is a trilateral exercise again between India, France and UAE. We have Desert Eagle 2, air combat exercise specifically between the UAE and India. The fugitives and the de-radicalization efforts by the UAE has also promoted good and friendly relations between these two nations, because most of the fugitives and the de-radicalization efforts against India originate in those regions, and UAE is one of those countries who have been very strict in this particular regard. As we can see from this diagram, the India-UAE bilateral trade as of 2022-2023 is touching around $72 thousand million dollars. We are targeting how much? Around $100 billion. We can also see about the various percentages of growth, which is around 68% as of now compared to the previous ones. We can also see the amount of import and export growth from this particular diagram. And if we can look at the remittances and the source of remittances, UAE is at the rank 2, just followed by the US. Now, what are the concluding angles from we can draw here? That we must be notching up the relations even much further. We must even go beyond the CEPA we have signed with the recent initiatives, the recent deals that we have tried to highlight. We shall be trying to go even more deeper so we can have more friendly relations with the UAE. And UAE will be a very important strategic partner when we are trying to counter a very big elephant in the room, that is the China. So to combat China in the economic fora, we need more economic partners in our favor. Also, there are some pending issues with respect to the UAE and also some of the other Gulf countries with India. The labor rights, or most of the migrants from here are labor migrants. So we must be trying to ensure their rights, specifically in the backdrop of our FIFA World Cup which took place in Qatar. The plight of the Indian migrant laborers become very prominent, that they were working in very poor conditions, paying very low wages. So we have to address those issues. There are also round-tripping allegations on the UAE where various shell organizations, various companies, multinational companies are accused of round-tripping the revenue of our Indian government. There are also issues of money laundering which we have to address immediately with respect to our relations. Now, moving beyond to the second article, this is an article discussing about the controversy regarding the recent amendment to the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. This is important from your general paper, General Studies 3, paper 3, where let us first discuss about the context. The context is that our Indian forests, or forests wherever, are the lungs of our earth. So their conservation is very important, particularly in a time where there is incessant deforestation. Forests are very important for their ecological benefits, for their carrying capacity, and for the amount of carbon sequestration, or the amount of carbon dioxide they take in and the oxygen that they supply. So they are very important, and also for the local communities who live there, the livelihood that they generate from the forest produce, such as selling forest items, bamboo, timber, various seeds, fruits, vegetables. So this makes the forest a very important, feature. And it also maintains the homeostasis, or the state of affairs in the ecology, where forests are natural force bearers. Now, when we come to India, before the implementation of Forest Conservation Act of 1980, which specifically did what? They wanted to regulate the forest areas. But before 1980, we did not have the particular act. So, from 1951 to 1975, around 4 million hectares of forest lands were diverted. For what? For non-forest use purposes, often legally and illegally. Now, this is doing what? This is leading to more and more deforestation, right? But after the implementation of Forest Conservation Act of 1980, from 1980 to 2013, only 1 million hectares of forest land have been diverted. So we can see there is an improvement in the amount of effort of deforestation. Now, a very important case comes into picture here, the Godavarman case of 1996. Here, one of the first efforts to define forests were undertaken. Now, it is to be mentioned that we do not have yet a very clear definition of forest. Only this case, Godavarman case, is giving us a definition of forest, that is a dictionary definition of forest. Now, the dictionary definition of forest says that a dense growth of trees and underbrush covering a large area should be actually what is a forest. But we have various forest acts in India. The Forest Rights Act, the Forest Act of 1927, right? Then Forest Conservation Act, none of the act comprehensively defines forests. Now we have adopted what? The Kyoto Protocol definition of forest, where we have various areas of minimum amount of hectares. Then we have amount of canopy density. So first the minimum amount of hectares, and through the canopy density we are trying to define forests, right? But the dictionary definition of forest is actually giving what? A much more comprehensive and a very strict definition of forest at large, right? Now it has been a debate whether the Godavarman case definition is more accurate or the Indian government's resemblance with the Kyoto Protocol definition of area and canopy strength is more prominent. Now before going into more intricacies of this debate, let me tell you that in India we have around 3.28 lakh square kilometers of geographical area. Out of this, the total forest cover area in 2021 was to be found at 21.71. Now this is not including one important kind of forest, that is trees outside forest areas, which look like forests, which have the unique characteristics of forests, but maybe they have been diverted for some non-forest purposes such as plantation, commercial farming, right? Now this constitutes to be around 3%. So if we calculate, the total forest cover comes to be around 28%, and India, through various agreements at international level, we have a target of around achieving 3 billion tons of carbon sequestration, right, or acting as a carbon sink from our forests. And also we have to increase our forest area to around 1/3 of our total geography area, that is around 33%. So we need more and more areas to be designated as forest for our climate efforts. Now the thing is that here the Indian government, or say we as large, cannot increase the total forest cover because these areas are consisting of very dense and medium dense forests. These are natural forests. Now our afforestation efforts have to be in cases of forests which are kind of new, so they won't be fitting that dictionary definition of forest at large. So there have been certain amendments towards this act. Before the amendment, let me discuss the very act at large, the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. Now the 1980 Act is trying to regulate the extraction of forest resources. They can be from basic timber, bamboo, to even the coal and mineral resources that are found within the forest. And they will be regulating who? Both the industries who are trying to tap into the forest areas, and also the forest dwelling communities who are themselves habitants of that particular forest. Now it is to be noted that forest dwellers and some populations of scheduled tribals, they have a particular act known as Forest Rights Act of 2006, whether they have some hereditary rights over forests. Now let us not bring that act into this respect, let us be confined within this act. Now the central government nod is very much important for any diversion of land that we want to do for developmental purpose. So central government is the kind of agency that will be approving that. The regulation of forest land is to prevent diversion for non-forest activities. Now under 1980, the original act, there were 4 criteria. These were the non-forest activities: mining and quarrying, construction of brick kilns, and infrastructural development such as roads, railways in the forests. So these were the activities which require central government non-mandatorily. And in any case, if the land has been diverted, there has to be a compensation equal to the net present value, or what is the value of the forested land and the various resources that the forest entails. The net present value has to be paid for. This can be done via afforestation, right, and reforestation of the same deforested area. Here there is a mandatory compensatory afforestation which is legally valid. Then the consultation with the states and the local community, especially the tribal people, is also required for this particular diversion of forest lands. We have also tried to inculcate the concept of dim forest, or forests which are not recorded as forest according to government data, but they resemble the look and structure of forests. So deemed forests are also brought under this act. This was done actually via later amendment. Then there are obviously penalties who are not abiding by these regulations. The 2023 proposed amendments are very interesting. First, the government inserted a new preamble or introduction or the novel purpose of the amendments and also to the act. It has also changed the name to the act from Forest Conservation Act of 1980 to Forest Conservation and Augmentation Act. Right? Now it applies to the lands. This is very important. Please follow very closely. This applies to the lands to any government record as forest. Now this government record can be any forest under the Indian Forests Act of 1927 and also to any state government order or regulation or their own definition of forest. Now these state governments were given a leeway of defining their own forests under the Godavarman case that we discussed in the beginning. Right? Now this amendment is doing what? This is trying to give government record to forest under the Indian Forest Act or to any other instructions by the state governments, and also any land that was legally diverted, that was actually given the permission by the central government from the period of 1980 to 1996. That is the case of the Supreme Court, the Godavaram case. Now these lands will be outside the 2023 bill and act if it becomes an act later. Also, there is a provision of excluding the forests which lie within the 100 kilometers of our Indian borders. This will be near the areas of our Himalayan forests. So this will be for strategic purpose and of national importance. Correct? So these forests will be exempted again from this amendment. Now, what are the needs for this amendment? This is generally to increase the trees outside forest area. Right? If we try to exclude certain areas, especially those areas which were given the government notes between 1980 to 1996, and they are right now being used as plantations or cultivation areas, where they will also be included as trees covered outside forest area. So basically the intention is to increase the forest area at large. Then it will also be providing impetus to increase the private plantations at all, because we know that the permissions from 1980 to 1996, those were the permissions that were given by the government to set up various plantations in various states. So they can also continue without the fear of being taken, of their lands being taken by the government. So they can continue their cultivations. This will also increase the carbon sink to around $3 billion, because via this act we will be trying to strengthen our efforts at afforestation practices. And we will also be removing restrictions on infrastructure which were earlier a restricted activity or say non-forest activity. So we are now not including infrastructure as a non-forest activity. Now various issues are coming out of this. First, it is diluting the 1996 case of Godavaram case, right? Because it is being said that the 100 kilometer border areas will now be exempted. Now the 1980 to 96 areas which were given non-forestry purpose development, they will also be excluded. So this is kind of excluding the domain of the judgment at large. Then there are various ecological sensitive areas, particularly the Western Ghats, particularly the Himalayan regions, who are especially around the border areas of China, Myanmar. So if this act is not applicable to this area, what will happen to their conservation? And this is also one concern that the northeastern states specifically has raised, because they share borders with Bangladesh, China and Myanmar. They will fear that their lands or their forests will be taken up for strategic purpose by the government. Then this act also expands the list of permitted activities, which was not earlier. Now various checkposts can be constructed, fencing can be done, bridges can be built, zoos can be, as a form of recreation activity within the forests. Safaris, ecotourism facilities are being promoted. Then not much consultations with the parliamentary conventions have been followed in this particular, because the Joint Parliamentary Committee, it is alleged by various leaders of opposition and by the opposition parties also that the consultation was not proper. And another important issue is that the tribal people, the various local communities are alleging that the Van Sanrakshan Evam Samvardhan Adhiniyam, this term is also the new name of this act. Now they are telling that this is not inclusive because they feel that this is over Sanskritization. This is not inclusive of their local norms and local language. Finally, the forest conservation is a matter in the concurrent lease. So states are not also happy. The central government will be having the powers to make do with the provisions of this act. Now, the way ahead will be in this direction, that the consultation with the states and the local communities must be done before actually it is made an act. The balance between nature and economy must be found. While we are trying to promote more and more trees outside forest areas, more and more plantation activities in the forest areas, we should also be aware of the carrying capacity of the environment at large, because this is one particular aspect which is actually maintaining the balance in our ecosystem. So between sustainable development and over capitalistic tendencies, the balance must be found. The spirit of the Godavarman case must also be adhered to, because here the definition of forest was much strict. No, we cannot dilute this case at large. We must be having overall consultation, and also this is a Supreme Court case, so we should be abiding by its orders. Okay. Now the next article is a very serious one, where if we can see these particular areas of Europe which is particularly highlighted in red, these are facing a situation known as heat waves. Heat waves are extreme weather events which are plaguing the entire world as of now, right? So Europe is right now reeling under heat wave, heat stress, which is actually making the lives of the people there much more difficult. And let me tell you, in 2022, there have been around more than 60,000 deaths in Europe, particularly due to heat wave. Now to understand this, let us go back to the concepts of our jet stream. Now under normal circumstances or normal times where there is not much global warming or not much influence of increasing temperatures on our earth, then under the normal circumstances the jet streams are usually following a common wavy pattern like this. So this is a subtropical jet, this is the polar jet above, right? Now under normal conditions things will be like this. Now when the polar regions becoming warmer, or the north and south poles become warmer due to climate change, there is more melting of glaciers there. So there will be a redistribution of temperature around the earth. When our temperatures due to global warming is increasing, this will also impact the wavy pattern of our jet stream. Our jet streams, if we can observe between these two figures, will becoming more wavy in nature, or the temperature gradients between the various pressure zones between these two particular worlds will be more severe, and this will be leading to more and more extreme climate weather events, and this is one outcome of that particular thing only. Now if we look at the case of Europe, we have the Icelandic low and the Azores high during normal period of time during summers. During the summer period, we know what? That the earth is tilted toward the sun, and most of the insolation from the sun directly comes on the Tropic of Cancer. So according to that only, we have various areas of high pressure and low pressure zones. So under normal conditions, there will be Icelandic low in that particular region of Europe, off the coast of Scandinavia, and of the coast of the United Kingdom, we will be having the Azores High, which will be keeping the subtropical jet stream in its own position. Now, when climate change and global warming comes into this picture, which with rising temperatures, this will be doing what? This will be making the cold air or the area under low pressure come further towards the equator. This is a very concerning area, because when this jet stream will be influenced by these moving parcels of warm cold air front, this will be pushing this low area further down towards the equator. This will be also pushing the high pressure region towards the poles. Now we can understand during summer seasons the insolation of sun comes directly, and combine this with global warming. So the heat that comes from outside, right, from the sun, this creates warming at the ground level, and we know the ground also radiates heat back to the atmosphere. But the thing is right now that because the low pressure or the Icelandic low has come down towards the equator, this is creating a layer of high pressure zone over this particular area of Europe. So essentially what is being happening is that heat is being trapped because of the high pressure in the atmosphere that is prevailing due to Azores High, and the air that is being trapped is getting more compressed, and this is getting more and more hotter. This is creating what? A dome-like effect, which is essentially creating the effect of heat wave. Now, the World Meteorological Organization defines heat wave as 5 or more consecutive days during which the daily average maximum temperature surpasses the average maximum temperature by 5 degrees Celsius. Now, interpretations vary of heat waves. We also have different definitions of heat wave, but the situation is like this. This is the main reason. Now, this specific case of the European heat wave during summers, they have reasons. The first two are the natural reasons that we have seen, that it is because of the summer season that they are receiving more and more solar insolation, and also the high pressure area which is becoming more intense because of the increased temperature of our world. The anthropogenic reasons can be attributed to various reasons. First, that the North African continent, right, the North African part of the continent is right now seeing anticyclones, and experts predict that the next waves of heat waves will also be contributed to that, and this is a cause of anthropogenic events. Why? Because the North Africa is an area which is kind of aiming for industrialization, and most of the countries are developed countries. So there are lots and lots of emissions out there, right? Then as of now, recently we have seen that the global temperatures are at the global maximum of all times. This is due to climate change, which specifically began due to the industrial revolution that started long back. Then there are also cases of increased emissions. What the increased emission is doing, they are further amplifying this heat effect, because we know carbon dioxide is a gas with high global warming potential. Global warming potential means per unit of carbon dioxide emission is trapping a particular unit of gas or heat from the sun. So when there will be more and more accumulation of carbon dioxide, when there will be more and more accumulation of nitrogen oxides which are having global warming potential, naturally the heat trapped will becoming more denser and more hotter, right? Okay, now what are the effects of heat waves? The effects of heat waves, the first thing that was seen last year was a wide amount of wildfires. Why? Because under areas of high pressure are generally areas of dry conditions, because most of the winds have actually dispersed off to the low pressure areas. So that particular area will be having clearer skies and dry weather conditions, where the trees and the leaves of the trees also become drier, and when they rub against each other they create friction and hence fire, and the wildfire will be having a prominent season under this particular time. This is also seen in the case of Australia in the month of December. The same thing happens in Australia, where in Australia we do not have wildfires, we have bush fires. Now, due to dry conditions, food supply chain is also disrupted because the fertility of the soil decreases, right? Because most of the moisture evaporates into the atmosphere due to scorching heat. So, food supply chain is also disrupted. Then there is huge demand of cooling requirements or artificial cooling, like ACs, right? We need more and more ACs in these conditions. So, this will be leading more and more demand for hydrofluorocarbons. This is again a very potential greenhouse gas with high global warming potential. So, again this situation will be impacted more. Desertification is a prominent phenomenon when the soil loses moisture and its innate ability to retain its fertility. So, fertility of the soil also reduces. This leads to spreading of desertification under areas of high heat waves. And also human and animal life is also impacted because we can understand due to heat waves, the area or the ambient temperature increases to around 45 degrees to 50 degrees, whereas our body can tolerate around the range of 35 to around the 40 to 40-ish range, early 40-ish range. Now, when the outside environment becomes too much hotter, the heart starts to beat much faster, and this actually leads to more and more exhaustion. Also, this leads to more and more sweat dissipation from the body, which leads to adverse effect on the body at large. So, the way ahead in this respect will be that we should be having a heat wave action plan where countries must be adhering to Sendai framework, and the states' responsibilities or the states' activities towards containing the heat wave should be very much important. Then the Paris Agreement focused on nationally determined contributions, or these are what? National goals. So, the developed countries of the Western European countries such as Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, which are reeling under heat waves, they must be having national goals that are suitably catered to their own well-being, right? Then we must be finding nature-based solution to these heat waves. We must be applying white coat on the top of our building so that it can have maximum reflective and radiative effect. As we know that white reflects maximum amount of the sunlight or incoming solar radiation. We must be having more and plants, forestation activities which are nature-based solutions. We must be also trying to source our cooling requirements by using proper ventilation architecture in our buildings. We must be trying to find technologies that are not much more reliant on hydrofluorocarbons. So, there must be passive cooling technology. And finally, public awareness is a very big concern here, or way to go ahead in this respect, because as we have seen from 2002 onwards, Europe has seen lakhs and lakhs of heat wave dates from now till now. So, public need to be aware of the ill effects of the heat wave. Tourists must not be encouraged at this time to go and visit Europe, specifically the US tourists who find summer season the best time to roam around in Europe. So, they must be issued advisories that this is not the prominent time to go and visit Europe. Okay. Now, the next article is about reviving groundwater facilities in India. So, with respect to a particular governmental scheme known as the Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, or AMRUT, which was launched in 2015. Let us first discuss this. So, in this scheme, around 500 urban local bodies of India with population of 1 lakh or more were selected, right? And they were given a total outlay of 1 lakh crore. For what? For these areas. These will be to increase the amount of water supply facilities, sewerage and septic management, storm water drainage, green spaces and parks, non-motorized urban transport, and capacity building or scaling of the urban local body workforce. So, this will be to rejuvenate and develop our urban spaces even more further, because As of now, around 30% of India's population is living in cities, and their welfare is very important for the government at large. And with this mission only, this was renewed in AMRUT 2.0, where it was renewed up to the year of 2025-2026, with now the total outlay is around 2,77,000 crore rupees. Here, the target is the universal coverage of water supply by providing all households in all 4,378 statutory towns. So, the universal coverage of water supply is a new concept in AMRUT 2.0. Another new concept is a 100% coverage of household sewerage and septage management in around 500 AMRUT cities, and also we will be providing 2.68 crore tap water connections, right, and also sewer and septage management connections to these households at large. Now, this particular news is actually concerned with 10 cities where a pilot project is being done to actually rejuvenate the natural or man-made aquifers. Aquifers are what? They are kind of systems of water through which people extract their daily needs of water that are around 3 meter to 5 meter in depth. The 10 cities are Kolkata, Chennai, Jaipur, Gwalior, Dhanbad, Rajkot, Thane, Pune, Hyderabad and Bengaluru, where these cities have since historical times have had heritage reservoirs, bore wells and other shallow aquifers where there is a prominent culture of extracting water from these particular areas, right. Now, some of the city specific projects can be seen here, where each of the cities or each of the projects have been given 20 lakh rupees to undertake the conservation efforts in these aquifers. The nodal ministry is Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So, this is information that you can use in your prelims, and also let me tell you, these are also some value additions which you can enrich in your mains answers with respect to urbanization and the various issues regarding that. The last article today is with respect to CRISPR technology, where we can use now CRISPR to get better quality of wood fibers. Now, wood is used in almost every aspect of our life, like furnitures. So, to get better furnitures, we can use CRISPR technology. A recent study has highlighted. Now, to understand CRISPR, now let us take the example of a particular essay that you are writing for your mains. Now, suppose you have written 2 to 3 paragraphs. Now, after reviewing your own paragraphs, you have found that there are 2-3 lines that you need to modify, right. It can be the case that maybe by mistake you have done that. Some grammatical mistake, some factual error that can be there, which is actually undesired. So, what you do? You just cut it along with a stroke of your pen, and you can give a star mark somewhere else, or if you have whitener, or if you can use any other equipment, or if you are typing this essay on your computer, you can just do what? You can select the text and modify and write according to your own requirements. Now, apply the same with respect to a particular strand of DNA, which is the fundamental building of life, because DNA is containing what? The messages, the rules, conducts of each and every part of our living existence. It is containing the genetic material, right, of human beings. Now, if any defect in genetic material is found, for example, there may be a particular area of our DNA which is undesired. For example, this is containing a genetic disease, for example, the Alzheimer's. Now, this CRISPR technology is giving us the facility to cut, delete and paste a healthy genetic material. This is done how? This we can identify that this particular is the area that we don't need. For example, the areas that you try to identify in your essay. So, we first be identifying that. Then we will be using something known as Cas9. Cas9 is this particular module of DNA, or this is particularly an RNA that can actually take the place of that cut position and can stick to it, so that we can remove this diseased area of our genetic material and replace it with a healthy material. So this is a very simple way of CRISPR technology where we can do this, replicate this in multiple areas. The full form of CRISPR is clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. Repeats why? We can use this on an enormous amount of scale, right? Okay. Now, the applications of this technology is huge. First, we can use it for genome editing. Genome editing, particularly in case of identifying genetic diseases like sickle cell disease, cystic fibrosis, which are kind of genetic in nature. So, any genetic disease generally do not have any cure. So, CRISPR technology is the cure for that, where we can particularly delete that portion of our DNA to be eradicated from that disease, not only for us, for also our future generations. We can also do disease modeling to study the emerging trends of new diseases, particularly by identifying various states of viruses, bacteria, and modeling or using this technology on them. We can also aim for crop improvement to make crops more pesticide resilient, pest resilient, more and more productive, that we can identify a particular amount of DNA and we can modify it of the crops. We can also repair the environment of the damage that we have caused so far. In cases of oil leaks, in cases of oil spills in the ocean, there is a particular organism known as oil zapper. So we can also use the technology of CRISPR technology to increase the efficiency of oil zappers. We can also clear up landfills which are polluting in nature. We can also clear the amount of acidification of soils through this technology at large. And finally, the basic research is very important because we are trying to identify the questions of our existence and our life. We can also go on to modify and create our own upgraded amount of human versions, where we can get rid of heart diseases, where we can get rid of aging patterns in human beings. So CRISPR technology is also important for that. But there are some challenges. First, there are some safety issues with respect to trials. This is a field of biotechnology, and this needs live samples for trials. So there are some safety concerns with respect to that. There can be various biocontamination implication of these trials. There are some ethical concerns where human beings are now being told to play God, because when we are doing modification at a genetic level, are we now playing God? So are there not be some ethical questions regarding that? And finally, there are some regulatory challenges, because most of the countries, even the Western countries, the Indian countries, do not have specifically tailored regulations for CRISPR at large, right? So this was all from my side today. We will be meeting again in our next session. Until then, be curious and all the best for your preparation at large. Thank you. All the best.